Okay.
So this article, sir, The Dirty Secret of California's Weed, it was the result of an investigation that found that there were alarming levels of pesticides in cannabis products at dispensaries. I'm not even talking about what you're getting from the plug on the corner. We ain't even gonna talk about that because that is a
It
bridge
might
to
have been
fear that I
cleaner.
don't want to deal with. Oh, you said it might be cleaner?
It might be cleaner. But
Say
let's
more,
go.
sir.
Okay. Well,
No,
I'll
no,
say
I
this.
don't need to say nothing else. Go, please, take the mic.
Okay. I'm just going to preface by saying this. Now, when California entered the recreational market, they had a promise that legal weed is clean weed, and they started a social media campaign around it.
Yep.
But the problem was years later when LA Times and Weed Week decided to, and it was in response to complaints that
Hmm.
that they've been getting, that people have been getting sick. Now, the
Wow.
weed products, and in this particular study, it was primarily for vape and vape cartridges. And what they found were, as you said, they found that the levels were astronomical. There
Right.
were pesticides in there that they didn't even test for. And they
Oh my
came
God.
from like a Chinese market. Someone buys in bulk, they ship to the United States, they make a product. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. And while California has been singled out, I wouldn't hesitate to say that it's probably every state in the country.
Oh my gosh. You know, sir, one of the things that in like the romanticized view of the cannabis world, we're all growing our own pots of
Mhm.
pot. We're all we're sort of, curating it. We're like little urban farmers with our little pot of pot on the windowsill. But the reality is most of us are not actually growing and harvesting our own. The
No,
vast majority are not growing and harvesting our own cannabis. And so we are essentially trusting that the cannabis that we might consume is going to not harm us. And when someone is going to the plug on the block, no one is usually say, man, where you source your stuff from, right? You sure it's clean, it's legit. We aren't even having that conversation. But because of this marketing campaign in California, there is this and not just California, the other places have done it as well. There is this sort of willingness to believe that, well, it's regulated, that we have an FDA, we've got all these agencies, forgetting that this is illegal at the federal level still, even though they're talking about rescheduling. That's not done. There are no federal agencies testing and evaluating the weed as it's coming into the country. There's no agencies testing and evaluating the weed grown in the country on farms that are also similarly not regulated in that way. How much risk are we at when it comes to the pesticide potential, when it comes to not understanding not only what pesticides are there, but what those pesticides do when they collaborate and get into the human body? I'm reminded of perms and hair straighteners. Yeah, you might
right.
test an individual chemical in the hair straightening cream. No one's testing what those hair straightening cream chemicals do when they're in combination, which is why we now have reports of Black women with straightened hair also having increased risk of uterine cancers. How big could this risk be for our health if we are
Now
consuming
I'm
this
going to
cannabis?
touch on maybe 2 or 3 points quickly. One thing that you said, how damaging are these pesticides? Now, the levels that we've seen, what's possible is that you can have on the light end coughing, headaches, burning eyes, and a sore throat, in addition to some other things. But long-term impact from ingesting these pesticides, there's neurological damage, there's cancers, birth defects, endocrine disruption, which is hormones, increased risk of leukemia and Parkinson's disease. And that's just from vaping. That's just
Oh my
from the
God.
chemicals that's there. So,
And people have been thinking vaping is the cleaner inhalation method.
well,
Jeez.
I'll say this. In in creating these vape cartridges, there's an oil that you put in, but there's a market for dirty weed. There's a
Mm.
market for dirty weed. So there are guys, and I'll call them bad actors. They go around, they buy this biomass. The farmers know, or the growers know that it's bad. So what they do is they dilute it to minimize the amount of pesticide in there. But in the manufacturing process, you may damage or destroy a few pesticides. But in essence, what you've done is concentrated. So you put ingesting even
Oh
more into your
no.
system. I hate to
Oh
be the bearer of bad
gosh.
news.
No, sir, you are the bearer of good news because you're gonna help a whole lot of people put away their dirty weed habits. So when we're talking about this report out of the LA Times, and Amina, I'm gonna drop this into the call sheet so that you can please tweet this out. And Nubia, I'll share this with you as well. But when we're talking about this article from the LA Times, they had some interesting statistics that I think are hugely problematic for those
Yes,
of us
yes.
for those of us who care. They said 25 of 42 legal cannabis products that the Times and Weed Week purchased from retail stores and had tested at private labs. They should have been using your lab. I don't know if they did, but tested at private labs showed concentrations of pesticides either above the levels that the state allows or at levels that exceed federal standards for tobacco. The contaminants include chemicals tied to cancer, liver failure, thyroid disease, and genetic and neurologic harm to users and unborn children. Mr. Middleton, this feels like the biggest setup in the world. Are we just sitting patsies here, those of us who are excited about the expansion in the cannabis movement?
Well, just to touch on the 25 of the 42 legal cannabis products, there were 45 toxic chemicals in those. I mean, highly toxic chemicals in those. So the worst guy is not even supposed to be in California. Chlorphenapyr.
Wow.
It's an insecticide. It's not permitted on any food products, and no amount is allowed in California cannabis. There is an allowable amount in everything. In flour, you can have bugs or wings or whatever. But this particular guy is over 2,000 times the allowable amount. Jesus. The next one was pymetrazine at almost 800 times over the allowable amount. So they found all of these, and there are some, like pymetrazine, California doesn't even screen for that. So I wanted to touch on something quickly, because for the pesticides, there are 66 pesticides that California tests for. Now, Oregon tests for 59, Colorado 99, Georgia only 30, and New York only 70. So that's bad across the country. There's hundreds of pesticides and pesticide mixes. So that's why I'm in support of a national standardized testing. So we all are playing on the same board.
That disparity in among the states, that's one of the reasons why, going back to this Supreme Court term, that I'm really concerned, because we already have such disparity with what the various states are going to consider a problem. So if California is testing for pesticides that New York isn't, what might be legal in New York would not necessarily be legal in California. But again, no one is asking, hey man, where you get this from? let me know where your plug at.
You can purchase it online. I can buy a California product and have it sent to you.
Wow.
For pesticides.
Wow. Oh my God. So what do we know if there's any legislative fixes to this? You said you called for a national standard. Is that something we should be elevating?
Not so much
as we're
that I
having
called
this
for, but
conversation?
that's what I'm hoping happens. That's what I'm hoping happens, and that's what I want to take part in, even if I have to help lead the charge on that. That's actually what I'd like to see, because it would remove bad actors, and standardizing testing will bring everybody up to a certain level to play with. And the bad people, hopefully, there will always be bad people, but it won't be as many.
Now, you said at the beginning, I was being a little tongue in cheek, but you said that the cannabis that you get from the plug on the block might be cleaner than the clean cannabis, quote unquote, that you're getting in dispensaries.
Well, I'm in a home grown. It's a homegrown. Yeah, they're going to purchase soil and maybe use very few minimal pesticides. If you look at what's going on in, let's say, the state of California, they're mass producing to sell, and there's a financial incentive, so they don't care. Now, the state of California has, they don't test for pesticides. There's no regulation for the state to test. So they are dependent upon independent laboratories or maybe governmental agencies. But the state, like Department of Agriculture, there's no methods in place to test for pesticides there. I was shocked at that.
Wow. So it feels as though as much as we are, and one of the things that I like to do is course correct, because just because you head down a path, if you recognize that there's trouble up ahead, you don't just stay on the path, you course correct and you make some adjustments. And I want
Right.
to have a type of conversation about cannabis that, yes, we're excited about expansion and legalization and opportunities for investment, but I'm a health nut in a whole lot of areas, even though I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with coffee. But I try as much as I can to buy organic when I can, when it's affordable, because sometimes it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of being able to grow my own products. And there was a time when, at the point where I was using cannabis, and I had one of those, what is it, decarboxylators? I can't remember how to say it, but
Right.
it's the
Right.
machine that you
It
insert the
takes the
cannabis, you can
carboxyl
infuse.
group off. It takes the
Yes.
carboxyl
Let's
group off.
can you explain to us the science behind that works? Because I have a follow-up question that I'm not quite clear on.
Okay. Let's say in a chemical equation, there's bonds, and those bonds are like, let's call it a line. And to change the chemical makeup, the molecular weight, what is totally called, then you have to break that bond. So to decarboxylate, you're taking a group off. And so you're left with a different chain, you're left with a different molecular weight, basically a different product. But also, when you do that, it changes it. If you heat it up to decarboxylate it, then you may derive the THA, TCA, the A on it, the acid.
Huh. So is that better for us or is that worse for us? So once, if I've
Well,
taken dirty weed and I've decarboxylated it and distilled it into an oil or a honey or a butter, if it's got those pesticides in it, does that heating process, does that mean that I've also made that more potent as well?
yes, it will damage some of the pesticides, meaning it will relatively rule them inactive. But if you concentrate them, you're going to make them more effective for them.
Hmm. Where do we get the clean stuff at, Doc? I know
You're
you
going
say
to,
you're not a doctor, but come on, Dr. Middleton. Where, if people want clean cannabis, where's the Whole Foods or the Trader Joe's for people who want to consume
well,
clean
let's
cannabis?
stay with the homegrown people. And this is what I
Okay.
always advise for us as a lab. If you want to create your own product, that's fine. Let us do the raw material testing, because let's go back to the guy that's buying dirty weed, and he's diluting it and selling this oil. And you buy this oil with the label on it, and you think you have a clean product. So when you create your product, you in effect created a dirty product. So when you buy your product, let us test it for you. We'll tell you. We'll give you the
So if I
absolute.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying we will tell you if your product is good. And if your product is good, then you're starting with a clean slate. Now you may mess up, down the road, but you're starting off clean.
At least you began with good intentions and good spaces. Here's a follow-up question. Let's say I'm not trying to make any products for mass production. I've procured some cannabis. It's got seeds in it. I think I might want to drop some in a plant pot and see if I can make something grow. But I'm not selling. This is something that
No,
I'm
no,
just
no.
using for my own personal consumption. Could I still have someone like you test that just so I know that the
Of
seeds
course.
I'm working with are not
There,
going to be
there's
bad
there's
seeds?
everything we can test. We can test the seed. We can do genetic testing on the seed. So at least you'll know the DNA of that seed and what you have. If you wanted to mate it with something else and develop your own strain,
Huh.
there should be an LDF strain.
Oh, Dr. Middleton.
It can be lavender and
Oh, Dr.
stuff. Come
Middleton.
on
You
now.
just said a thing. You
Come
just
on
said a
now.
thing. Hold on. Let me write that one down real quick. LDF straight. Okay. All right. All right. So you're giving me some ideas. You give me some ideas. All right.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons why I like having this segment, because I need to have experts who are able to come in and help us unpack things and think about things. And I live an organic life as much as I can. So I want to, if I were consuming cannabis, I'd want it to be as clean as possible. Is this something that has a significant financial cost to get it tested? Is there an opportunity if I'm in the category, if I'm not selling anything, I just want my personal stash tested? How much would I need to send to your laboratory to have tested? What would be the
But
process of hiring your company to test my
typ-
personal stash?
typically for flour, it needs to be a gram. And I'm talking about dry weight flour.
Okay.
It needs to be about a
Okay.
gram. But if you send 2 grams, then we can confirm whatever results we get if there's a mistake or whatever. But I think in testing and growing your own in testing, you asked about the cost. The cost is going to vary by lab. And the reason for that is it's expensive to get into that arena in the testing area. The machines are very expensive and you have to hire staff, and the staff has to be qualified and they have to know what they know. So in that regard, it's somewhat expensive. But if you find a great lab, you really need to stay with those guys, because there are people, again, when the bottom falls out, some of these labs are going to go belly up because they didn't do things the right way. They just did.
Wow. So how does one contact your laboratory, sir? You are the founder and CEO of a phenomenal laboratory that I like to promote because I think you do good work, Cannabiz Laboratory. If somebody out there is listening right now and they're like, man, I know Lurie might come out with the LDF strain, but I already have this other thing. I need to get this tested. I don't want to be giving dirty weed to my grandma and to my cousins and them. How would they reach out to you? What would they need to do to submit a sample to you? Let's talk them through that process, because I'm already seeing folks responding and saying, oh, wait a minute, let's find out what's going on here. What would be the process of hiring your lab?
We want to keep grandma safe because she's going to bake hers into cakes and brownies and stuff. She's not going to be smoking primarily. But we're Cannabiz Labs. You can reach us at 470-429-1619. That's 470-429-1619, or simply just go to the website at Cannabiz Labs, CANNABIZLABS, cannabizlabs.com.
It's so simple. I love your phone number. That's 1619.
1619. That's the thing.
Was that intentional or did that just happen?
Actually, I almost got into an argument about it because I wanted a certain number and the girl wouldn't give it to me. So I said, well, can I have this number? And she said, yes, okay. And that's how I got the number.
I'm a fan. So good on you for that, and good on her for her resistance to you and ending up with you getting this one. Mr. Middleton, I call you Dr. Middleton just because I feel like you have doctorate level understanding of these issues. I'm always grateful when you give us some of your time to talk about your work and how you do it. This article really shook me because I remember when vapes first came out and the different products, how they were being marketed to young people, and they were had all the chemicals in it. That's when we first learned about how bad it was. But I, like everyone else, am susceptible to marketing, and I was not trusting that the cannabis was clean as much as they said it was, but I certainly didn't realize it was this dirty, especially coming out of California with all the stereotypes there. So I'm so grateful for you giving us some of your time today. Really appreciate it.
Last thing, final thought. Since we're talking about vapes, the article was just about pesticides, but they didn't discuss residual solvents, because if they extracted that material with the chemical, which I'm sure they did, hexane, hopefully methanol or whatever, if they didn't have clean practices, when you inhale that vape cartridge, you're inhaling chemicals which are going to irritate your throat anyway. So this article was just about pesticides. Didn't discuss the heavy metals in the soil, didn't discuss the mold in the product. So there's tons of things to talk about. This was just
we're going to have to have you back. We're going to have you back because we got to have a different alternative. I'm so glad that cannabis they're doing the rescheduling process, assuming political winds don't shift in another direction. But we need to have this information so that we can demand the type of regulatory scheme that is really going to keep us safe, because this is extraordinarily worrisome. And a lot of people inhaling and coughing afterwards think that's just the inhalation coughing experience. Coughing after inhaling cannabis is a part of, it's part of the culture, not realizing that, nah, baby, it ain't the cannabis, it's the chemicals. And that is a huge problem. That is a huge problem. Dr. Kevin Middleton, as I like to call him, thank you so much for being a part of the LDF show.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to get an approved vendor list. So I'd like for us to test products, and we have an approved vendor list, and people can say it's safe to go to this. So we can talk about that another time.
Oh, yes, sir. Jonah, let's get another date on the calendar for Dr. Middleton, and we're going to talk offline as well. Thank you so much, sir. Yes. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Well. Goodbye to the crew. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Take care.
Bye.